Hello, I'm Daniel. I wanted to I think this will be very short, but we'll see. Often when I think things will be really short, I'm wrong. I saw a thing, a quote appeared in my time hop today. Do you time hop? A quote appeared in my time hop today, and it was something that I shared on Facebook 9 years ago. It's hard to believe I was on Facebook 9 years ago, but I had a time hop that appeared. That it was a quote I shared on Facebook 9 years ago, and I really like it, so I want to tell you about it. The quote is from Patanjali. I think I'm saying that right, Patanjali. He wrote a text called the Yoga Sutra. He's not a Buddhist teacher. He's a yoga / Hindu teacher, and the philosophical aspect of yoga, the part of yoga that's not just stretching. I know some people think yoga is just stretching, or just is really sort of insulting to say, but people think yoga is stretching, but he's a philosophical yoga teacher, and his teaching really is very similar to Buddhism. He came from around the same time, from around the same tradition, from around the same place as the Buddha, so it makes sense that it's similar. But anyway, rambling now. The quote that appeared in my time hop that was really meaningful to me was, "The mind becomes clear and serene when the qualities of the heart are cultivated." The mind becomes clear and serene when the qualities of the heart are cultivated. Friendliness toward the joyful, compassion towards the suffering, happiness towards the pure, and impartiality towards the impure. I'll read those again. If you study Buddhism, these might sound vaguely familiar to you. I think I may have even talked about a similar teaching recently. Friendliness toward the joyful, compassion toward the suffering, happiness toward the pure, and impartiality toward the impure. So this sort of makes me think, well, it makes me think of a Buddhist teaching that I'll go into in a minute, but it sort of makes me think, what happened to just being nice to each other? I think that we spend a lot of time trying to prove we're right, or trying to win an argument. That's the same as proving we're right, I guess. Or trying to say, I'm different from this person, I'm better than you. And we lose track of just being nice. When we judge other people, we lose track of just being nice. We should be compassion-centered. We should be thinking of compassion first, not what's wrong with someone or what they've done wrong or how they're different. We should be centered in compassion first. And a lot of time, it seems like we're not. It seems like it's hard when we look around to find the compassion. And it's meaningful that that appeared in my time hop from Facebook, because I think in social media, right now especially, we see a lot of people who are not seeming to think about compassion. We see a lot of people who are quick to tear others down, who are quick to judge others and harshly criticize, and I think, where's the compassion? Where's the compassion toward the suffering? So anyway, these four things: friendliness toward the joyful, compassion toward the suffering, happiness toward the pure, and impartiality towards the impure, reminds me a lot of the Buddhist teaching of the four immeasurables. I think that in the yoga tradition, these may even be called the four immeasurables as well. And the four immeasurables in Buddhism are loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Loving kindness, that sounds like friendliness. Compassion, that sounds like compassion. Joy, that sounds like happiness. And equanimity, well, that sounds like impartiality, right? So, loving kindness means we want people to have what they need. We want people to be happy, to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Compassion means that we want people to suffer less. We want to relieve suffering whenever we can. Joy means we want to learn how to rejoice in the success of others. We want to learn how to find happiness in simple things too, like looking out at the pretty snow out my window, although later I might not take joy in it, but right now I can look at the pretty snow and take joy. That's joy as well. And then equanimity is just not letting the storms of life tear us down. It's not getting obsessed with having my way. It's about just being with what is and just acceptance, calm acceptance of life's varying events. That's what equanimity is. And so in the yoga text, he says friendliness toward the joyful, right? So we want to not be jealous. We want to not be torn down by jealousy of the joyful, right? And not think, compassion toward the suffering, and right, that means we don't want to stop to think if someone deserves our compassion. We don't want to stop to think that person's different from me, so I'm not going to feel compassion. That person thinks differently from me, so I'm not going to feel compassion. Or that person got themselves into that mess, so I don't feel compassion for them. We want to just have compassion regardless. And happiness toward the pure, I see that as joy, as just taking happiness in the success of others. If we can take happiness in the success of others, then we can have joy a lot of the time, right? If we can really enjoy seeing other happy people, then there's no limit to our happiness. Even when things are going south, if we can just look at others and be joyful, well, that's really good. Seems like that's probably the hardest one to cultivate, at least for me, but if we can learn how to cultivate that, then all the happiness in the universe is there for us, right? And then impartiality towards the impure, and that means I'm not going to judge people. I'm not going to think more highly of the people that remind me of myself, and less highly of the people that think really differently or look really differently than me. I'm going to have impartiality. I'm going to value those people the same, because we're all people, and the truth is that all of us, no matter what we look like, no matter what we do, no matter what we believe, we're all a lot more alike than we are different. So we should have that kind of impartiality toward the impure, where we see people that we want to judge as the same as us, because they are. And that is a really big challenge sometimes, especially in times like these. But if we do that, if we have a compassion, a positivity-centered life, then we're going to have a better life. And so we want to have a positivity, a compassion and love-centered life. And if we're not thinking of compassion first, then we might be off track. We're probably off track if we're thinking of judgment or even seemingly good things, like thinking of people getting what they deserve, right? If we think of bad people getting what they deserve and we take joy in that, well, we're not compassion-centered when we do that. And we want to be compassion-centered. We want to try really hard to be compassion-centered. We want to notice when we're not, and we want to try to develop more compassion to deal with those situations, instead of thinking, this is just the way I am. I'm just not a compassionate person. I just have a closed heart. Sometimes we tend to think, this is just the way I am, and that's our excuse to not try to be better. This is just the way I am. And that's not good thinking. That's poisonous thinking. I feel like that's what kids say. This is how I am. And then when we grow up, we realize, well, it's a challenge, but I can make changes. I can make changes. I can be better. This is how I am. It's not an answer to anything. I can make changes and I can be better. And I know that I am better if compassion is at the center of my thinking. And I know also my little corner of the world is better if compassion and kindness are at the center of my thinking. So that's above all what I want to say today. We should be having compassion before we think about having judgments or division. Before we think about building barriers between ourselves and other people, we should be thinking about compassion first. And I don't know if people used to be more compassionate, and I'm thinking that there was an earlier time when people didn't tear each other down like they do now. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's unrealistic thinking on my part. But I like to think people didn't tear each other down so much as they do today. So I like to think the world used to have more compassion, more goodwill than it does now. That's probably not true, though. There's probably always been people being really harsh with each other and tearing each other down. And the only thing we can do is try to be better. And I think it's true. The mind becomes clear and serene when the qualities of the heart are cultivated. when we train in compassion, when we take joy, when we engage happiness toward the pure and impartiality towards the impure, when we stop judging people, when we stop holding on so tightly to our views of ourselves and our views of other people, then our minds do become clear and serene. It's a lot easier to have a clear mind when we're not thinking about how much we don't like other people, or how much better we are. I think that we have these two competing views of ourselves that are both incorrect. We are often either thinking that we are the best and no one should judge us or look down on us because we're doing really great and we're perfect. I guess perfect is the word I want to use. We'll either, on the one hand, think we are perfect, we're really great, or on the other hand, we will think that we're just the lowest and we're the worst. We're either judging ourselves very highly or condemning ourselves very harshly, and no matter who you are, neither of those things is an accurate presentation of reality. It's somewhere in between the harshest and the kindest judgment, right? And we do the same with other people. If there's somebody that thinks like us, looks like us, does what we think they should do, sometimes we will really elevate them and we will think very highly of them. And we will maybe, even if they make mistakes, we'll come up with excuses for them. And we're not being dishonest, we'll come up with excuses and we'll really believe that that's why this person who thinks like me, looks like me, acts like me, made a mistake, we'll really give them that benefit of the doubt. Whereas if somebody thinks differently, looks differently, behaves differently than us, we're usually not impartial. We're usually going to think of ways to judge them more harshly, to tear them down, to take any little, whereas on the other, with the person we like, we're going to take any flaw and we're going to make an excuse for it. Whereas with the person we don't like, we're going to take any really small flaw and believe that's evidence that they're a monster. And again, just like our judgment of ourselves, we're rarely being really honest. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And really, we can start with compassion instead of judgment. We should want to start with compassion instead of judgments. And the world is a better place if we start with compassion instead of judgment. That's not to say it's very easy, because I know it's not, but I know that we can try. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to try. I don't say you should just do it. You should just have compassion for everyone. But I do want to say you should try, and you should, when you're having a harsh judgment, or when you're irritated with someone, or when you are not feeling particularly friendly, you can stop and you can take a moment and you can ask yourself, am I coming from a place of compassion? Am I? And if not, why not? And if not, can I? And I think a lot of the time, especially when we're on social media, because social media is not real, right? Social media is not real, but when we're on social media, we may see something that makes us judge someone, and we may immediately have harsh speech. And because social media is so fast, we immediately put that into the world. We immediately put that into the world. And we don't think about, am I coming from a place of compassion? We usually don't when we're doing Facebook on our phone, doing Twitter on our phone. We're not stopping to think anything. We're just going. I'm really guilty of that myself. I argue with people on the internet. Less than I used to, but more than I should. I like that. And We're not coming from a place of compassion when we do that. I'm not, certainly. I want to be right. So when I want to be right, or when I want to judge, or when I want to win an argument, my mind is not clear and serene. I'm not engaging the qualities of the heart that I want to be engaging. So I think we can do better. And I think we should try to do better. And when we have, so I'll repeat myself one more time, and I will say that when we come up to a harsh judgment, when we look down on someone, or when we're about to enter an argument, I think we should take a moment, just take a moment and ask ourselves, am I coming from a place of love and compassion? Am I coming from a place of love and compassion? And if we're not, sometimes we're going to ask ourselves that, and the answer is going to be no, and we're going to do the judgment, or we're going to do the argument anyway. But I still see that as a success if we take a moment to think about it. And other times we're going to ask ourselves that, and we're going to change what we're doing. And we're not going to enter the argument. And we're not going to have the judgment. And we're not going to condemn someone. So, I guess that's all I've got to say for right now. I will close by reading that quote again that inspired me to give this talk. The quote was from Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutra, and the quote is, "The mind becomes clear and serene when the qualities of the heart are cultivated. Friendliness toward the joyful, compassion toward the suffering, happiness toward the pure, and impartiality toward the impure." Friendliness toward the joyful, compassion toward the suffering, happiness toward the pure, impartiality toward the impure. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Let's all try to be nice. Let's all just try to be nice. See what happens. Okay, thank you.